Board games, it's what we're talking about. Treefrog and WARFROG games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing. And over there, to the side of me, is the person known as Hammy. And over here, below him, is the designer known as Martin. Martin and Hammy have worked together for a number of years, and we are going to talk about the way that it appears and the way that these games all came to be on this morning, on this stream. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good night, good whatever it is, wherever you are. This is episode 378 of Busy Beats and Board Game Blether. I stream at every day, 10 a.m. UK time, and we are discussing Treefrog and WARFROG with Martin, who has, incredibly influential designer. Thank you for joining me once more to chat about this. This is not just an opportunity to talk about, yes, the history, yes, what happened here, but also some slightly tangential questions that Hammy came up with when we were chatting. The nature of the artistic business divide, the nature of how money changes things, the nature of, the utility of playtesters and the necessity of volunteers. And of course, Hammy used to, back in the day, be the business brains behind these companies. And so I thought I'd get you two together for something of a reunion, and it is a great privilege to be here for that. And so thank you very much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Yeah. Makes sense that I'm below you, because I'm down under, doesn't it?
You should be upside down there, Martin.
It should be. I should be. Yeah.
Standing on your head.
Like rotate the camera 180.
Yes.
And then you could be on top. Because you'd be seeing from a different perspective, or maybe we should all be on our sides. But in all seriousness, can you look? We've already chatted for quite a while. Let's talk about Hammy. We chatted about how doing PCs and infrastructure lets you get the money to become the backer, as you call it, and the business brains behind WARFROG and Treefrog. And obviously that's why I'm here. But what are some of your favorite things? And would you like to say anything to let the people know a wee bit more about who you are?
Who I am. I'm a serial business owner. I get involved in businesses for the sake of it, I think. I'm fortunate enough to have had a decent amount of income in the past at times, and been able to dispose of it without having children on other things like board games and shops and other businesses and toy soldiers. I'm a big kid, really, but I'm a big kid that really likes games and have been a gamer for very, very, very long time. I met Martin 25, 28 years ago, maybe 30.
It's quite a long time ago, isn't it?
Early 90s, I reckon. We bumped into each other when I was busy running a games convention, I think. And then I discovered that Martin went to a games group in Manchester, and I went along to that and got dragged into the...
And this was back in the day when you both lived in the UK, because Martin, you only emigrated in 2013.
That's correct, yes.
Martin started the whole WARFROG design thing before I got involved. It was already established when I came along, but it was established on a different scale. And I got taken over. I got invited over to an Essen in, I think, about 98, might have been 99. Whenever you did Mordred was
might have been 99. Yeah, that was 99.
Probably 99. And Martin had been making these. Well, not true. You'd actually got some commercially published games then, hadn't you?
I think Unctious came out in '98.
Yeah.
So that was my first
and
professional game. And then there was another game, Device of Lotus.
What about the? Oh, I can't remember the name. I've not got
Lords of Creation on your
Lords of Creation
93.
I was thinking of
hello to CD, who thank you very much for joining us. It is as always a delight to have you here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose I wasn't counting Lords of Creation because that was originally self-published. But yeah, just don't remember if we went over this last time. Yeah, I think it was '97, I had some Dutch backers who put money in and we reprinted Lords of Creation. But there was a major printing cock-up. So I think '98 was when that came out. And it didn't go anywhere. And so '99, I was back to doing things in a very basic way, white boxes.
I have a white box, Martin.
Wow, which one's that?
Age of Arguments.
Yeah.
This is what people queued. Well, maybe not, but people happily parted money with at Essen. And this is what myself and my other Manchester gaming friends who played Martin's game, thought they were marvellous, saw. So you see the artwork, it's fantastic. And we open the game, and inside the box, this is quite an upmarket one because it's got cards in it. Look. Cards with a WARFROG on the back, he says, turning it the right way up. And then little plastic meeples, a A4 sheet of paper folded in half for the rules, and card stuck together with sellotape to make a map.
Do you know why it's got printed? Do you know why it's got printed cards in it? Don't you?
Yeah, that was Age of Arguments, wasn't it?
No, it was 1630 something.
1630 something. Sorry, yeah.
I was going to reprint 1630 something, and I got the cards printed, and then I ran out of money, so I couldn't get the rest of the components printed. So I had like thousands of decks of cards, for 1630 something, but I couldn't reprint the game. So I designed Age of Arguments around the cards from 1630 something.
The original Mordred was along those kind of lines. And,
just to clarify, you had a lot of blank cards that you then had to print on, or was it cards?
No, they were printed by a big Belgian company. Oh God, the people who do all the Cartamundi, yeah, it was published. They're printed in Belgium, so they're professionally printed. I know there's not a lot of color on the artwork, but you got to remember that was back in the day.
The cards were already completely printed. You couldn't change what was on the cards. You had to design the game around. Wow, that's quite the limitation.
Yeah, it is. Although recently, I think a couple of years ago, I got approached by a company who had all of the artwork for a game, but they had no game. And when we're talking about artwork, we're talking about top quality artwork by Mr. Cuddington. I mean, and plastic pieces. And I designed a game around that, and the game's really good. You might think, well, why did they? I was thinking, why did you have all of this artwork and no game? Said, yeah, we did have a game, and we got all the artwork done, but then we did some more playtesting, and the game just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And the game designer wouldn't modify it, so we ended up bidding the game, but we still had the artwork. So I've done it a number of times now.
One thing I've learned from having worked with Martin is that he's actually even better as a designer when he's got constraints.
Yeah.
You give him a constrained situation. You've got to make this work, and he does have the ability to come up with solutions to that without adding frills. Sometimes the constraint is history or background or theme, and sometimes it's the components. And
it's what all designers need, a constraint. But before we get too off track, because I'm loving this, rambling, but I think just in case, on the off chance that someone's watching this and they don't know who Martin Wallace is,
I think it's on the wrong channel, aren't they? I mean, who would randomly come on to a video stream like this and not be into games? Unless you're singing. Maybe that was it. Yeah.
I don't know, but so you have so many games. I mean, best known for Steam and Age of Steam, A Few Acres of Snow, Discworld, Ankh-Morpork, recently Brass, Birmingham, and Lancashire as they were reprinted, and I guess Tinner's Trail has just been on Kickstarter again.
Yeah.
But is there anything that you feel like you want? Is there anything that you would like people to know about you that they might not know? Like your favorite yogurt, for example.
I live in a vegan household. And the only yogurt we have in here is coconut, and I'm not a big fan of coconut. So I don't have a favorite yogurt at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. Trying to think.
That's something that I imagine few people would know about you.
Well, that I'm vegan. I'm not vegan. My wife's vegan.
No, that you're in a vegan household, and
I'm a vegan household.
And you don't have a favorite. Now we can say with authority, this is the big news of the stream. Martin has no favorite yogurt.
No. It's a long time since I had yogurt. I used to like hazelnut yogurt. Yeah, hazelnut yogurt was nice. And toffee yogurt. Yeah. Never a massive yogurt fan though. But,
I would like to spend 5 or 10 minutes going through the regular sections and starting off asking you both and also anyone watching, what are some of your recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. I mean, I could whitter on because I've played like 5 games yesterday. I did a bit of playtesting, so a lot of them were very similar. But yeah, let's go clockwise. Martin, what have you been playing yesterday or past week? Have you played anything? Have you been working on anything? What are some of your recent highlights?
I went to the Games Club on Sunday and playtested a Civilization game I'm working on. And that's okay. It's coming together. It's based on Anno 1800, so it still needs a little bit more development. What did I play then? And then we played Marvel Unlimited, the Chibi game, which is cooperative, so it's not really my kind of thing. Otherwise, today I redesigned a game on Wales, and I should really, maybe I'll pop down and get
the country, you mean?
Wales, the country, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I'm working on for Alley Cat Games. And I had a delivery today, and I've been waiting this for so long. I'll pop downstairs and get it in a minute. I've moved upstairs because it's warmer upstairs. My office is downstairs. But I had a delivery from China today, which is a prototype for Bloodstones. So, which, if you give me a second, Hammy can talk for a bit, and I'll go and I'll show you the bits of Bloodstones.
Let's do that. Hammy, what have been some of your recent highlights?
I'm very excited. First gaming session tonight for 15 months. That'll be good.
Wow.
I've tidied the games room. I've got a gaming table that's clear. That's very exciting, isn't it? I've no idea what we're going to play. It could be anything. I saw the announcement of all the nominations for Spiel des Jahres and so on. I haven't played any of them. Not one. Because they've all come out in the last year, and I've not played any games other than online and so on. So I'm really, really looking forward to tonight and playing some board games. In terms of achievements and what I've been doing, I've mainly been painting toy soldiers for proper miniatures war games. I've been doing quite a lot of them, not playing, some remote playing. I was due to play a game on Sunday, but didn't. Played a game a couple of weeks before that. But that's remote, where all the toys are on one table and the other person's on the other end of a computer screen telling you move them, and so on. Board game wise, the only board gaming I'm doing is online Quartermaster General on Facebook, on the Board Game Geek forums. Someone has written some nice scripts that let you play the game in a controlled way on Board Game Geek, and that's excellent because it's a brilliant game. I just wish Martin had invented it years ago, but he didn't. I asked him to invent a game about World War II, and he came up with this brilliant game, but it didn't meet the brief.
And
yeah.
before we get back to Martin, CD has picked up keys for a new apartment in Wellington. 3 years in the making. That sounds like a big milestone. So congratulations, and I hope that the new apartment really works out. And let me get off this banner.
CD, be nice when one day I'll get back over to Wellington when things settle down a bit for the convention. I haven't been over to New Zealand for ages.
Aren't you allowed to go there? Isn't Australia and New Zealand kind of linked?
There is a kind of on-off bubble. So in theory, I could go. The problem is, as soon as there is a single case, New Zealand lock shuts down. So you don't know when that's going to be. And so, yeah, you could go. But if something happens, you can end up with 2 weeks in quarantine. So it's still a bit of a risk. I think once more people are vaccinated, then it will become a bit safer. But at the moment, it's still just a bit too risky. Because the thing is, it's interesting. In the UK, there's still lots and lots of cases of COVID, but there's still people moving around. But literally in Queensland, if there is a single case of COVID, the borders close immediately. Boom, done. So we don't have, apart from people in quarantine, there are no cases in the wild. So it's very safe. And what it does mean is that, yeah, for months, I've been able to go to gaming things. I'm going to a games convention in July. So I can do a lot of gaming locally. Just can't really leave the state. But fortunately, the state is about, I don't know, 20 times the size of the UK, so there's still plenty to see here. So, yeah, I mean, maybe later in the year. I mean, technically, the Australian borders are still closed to the rest of the world and probably won't open up. I think it's talking about mid-2022. So, as I say, it's kind of a... Yeah, I mean, it's nice that Australia has done very well on keeping cases low, but the vaccination program is a mess. They're just not vaccinating people in at the same rate that they're doing in Europe or the UK. So, yeah, while the borders are closed, everything's fine. But as soon, I think vaccination is great. It means that it's harder for them to open up the borders sooner. But anyway, that's COVID. So anyway, so this will be an exclusive. Do you want an exclusive?
I would love to see the new Bloodstone prototype.
So this is the first time people have seen the prototype. So this is the box cover. So, okay, nice simple box cover. Okay.
And this is your return to self-publishing.
I think that's the only way to get this game done is to self-publish it, because if it went into retail, it probably cost about £200. So what you get is you get bags of bits, and all of the bits are these kind of high-impact plastic. I don't know if you can see that. It's probably a dark.
Wow.
And
so it's like proper mahjong tiles.
Yes, and that's why it's so expensive, because each faction has 36 of these tiles, and there's 4 factions at the moment. Plus, you get little village pieces as well, if I can find one. So you've also got your little village pieces. So everything, there's technically, once the game's done, there'll be nothing. The only thing that'll be cardboard is the box. So all of the playing pieces are hard impact plastic. The map is printed on cloth.
Oh, wow, that looks like a gorgeous map. I'm really liking this.
Is that the right way up? No. So it doesn't wrinkle. The nice thing is, it means you can get 5 or 6 maps in the box, and it doesn't add any weight. The box is a standard Cosmos size box. But if things go to plan, we'll have 6 factions all together, and maybe 5 maps in there. I mean, which is a lot of stuff in one box, in one small box. But basically, the way it works is each side has its own set of pieces, and they all vary. So people don't. So it's asymmetrical. So these red ones, these are the dragon riders. So they have a couple of dragons, which are like thermonuclear devices. You got the necromancers who can bring the dead back to life. You've got the hill giants who are very good at building castles and stomping on people. Then you've got the horse lords, which are the kind of humans who have better command and control. So you've kind of got, so they all fight in slightly different ways. But the rules are really simple, but it's a really deep strategy game. So yeah, so I was pretty excited to see that because I've been waiting a long time for the components.
Maybe you can show a wee bit more of the maps, because those were looking pretty nice. Very pretty.
I've got one map. There's only one map printed at the moment. I've got the artist has already done the second map, but that's not been printed yet. So yeah, so probably if I put it in front of me, I can't see the thing, but yeah.
It's looking very colourful.
It's nice. It's I think you'd like it, Hammy, because it is an interesting strategy game, even though it's a fairly generic theme. That for me is the only weakness with it. It is a generic theme, you know, because it's fantasy, but it was the only way to make it work. I just wanted a game that was simple in terms of the components, in that effectively you've only got really 2 types of components, which is your combat units and your little villages. So but the combat units are multi-use. So let's see. So it's like this one here. You can see that's a castle. And then on the left, well, there's 2 blocks on the left, which is the build cost. So that's the number of other pieces you have to chuck away to build it. And then on the right, you've got a pip value. And the pip value, you can use that. If it's in your hand, you can use it to move other units, and you can use it in combat. Basically, if it's on the board, it becomes a castle. But if it's in your hand, you can use it to do other things. So the interesting thing is, as you put things on the board, they're no longer in your deck side. If you think of them as cards, it's a deck destruction game. So if you build too many units which have got a high pip value on them, then you find it a lot harder to move your armies. So you want to keep back a certain number of high pip values. But it's just usually the high pip value tiles are also the really good units.
Of course. It's a bit like the Field of Glory card game in that respect.
And quick shouts out and hello to Matthew Dunstan, who just raided. Thank you very much. And a quick hello to Nicholas and Alex and J Fool's Guard. You just got here in the middle of Martin giving a sneak preview of Bloodstones, which is going to be Martin's return to self-publishing. And apparently, and I want to sing a quick song to say thank you, Matthew Dunstan, for the raid. I want you to know it's appreciated. Maybe it's morning or bedtime. Either way, it's a meeting of minds. We're talking about the history of the frog that came on a tree, and the way that it all went, and the way that games are made and spent. Yes, and thank you for following. So, Xenofuel, thank you very much for following along. So, Martin, presumably there's something special that this kind of arrested you, it's kind of invigorated your mind. Sorry, this sounds maybe a bit mean-spirited to say, and please forgive me this, but I've been thinking recently that conflicts, like warring conflicts, and also magic are the easiest settings to make a game about, because, you know, if you've got a military conflict or if there's a war going on, it's very clear, okay, this side is killing the other one, and the objective of the game becomes self-evident. Do you know what I mean? And with
Um,
magic, once you've got fantasy, once you've got a bit of magic, anything can go. So it almost feels like a way to explain away maybe slightly kludgy things that, whether it's War Machine, when it's, oh, well, we have to spend action points, but it kind of feels fine because you're a spellcaster and you're using these action points or your energy to control these units. I mean, with magic, you can basically explain anything. And
you're absolutely right. And as I say, that is the weakest part of the game. The thing is, normally I start with a theme. And this is one of the few occasions when I started with a mechanic, or when I didn't actually start with a mechanic. I started out with just the idea that I wanted to do a game with very, very simple components to be the kind of anti-Fantasy Flight game. Because I mean, we're going back a long time. I mean, I started this over 10 years ago. But I remember somebody at the Games Club unboxing the latest Fantasy Flight game. I think it must have been World of Warcraft or something like that. And I was just astounded at the number, the quantity of stuff inside the box, all the figures, the cards, dials, dice, so many different bits. And just the range of pieces alone was making my head hurt. And I'm thinking, that's just over the top. There has to be a way of doing things simpler than that, with a simple set of pieces, but with still deep gameplay. Not that World of Warcraft has got deep gameplay, but anyway. So yeah, it is. But yeah, combat is a lazy. It's very difficult. I mean, I'm probably going to get into trouble with this. Caesar will probably shout at me, but it's like I've been working on this Welsh game, and as a follow-up to Tinner's Trail, and I started by doing it as a straightforward economic game, like a brass light. And I took it to my regular crew last Thursday, and it was just dull. It was, mine stuff, sell it. And it was just very bland. But what was interesting, one of the guys that turned up, he saw the box, and because I'd called it Welsh Dragon. And he's like really excited. And then I opened the box and explained the rules, and he went, "So there's no dragons then?" I said, No, there's no dragons. Oh. And he was just sad. He was just like, and like I say, the game wasn't very good. So I thought, sod it. I'm going to put dragons in it. So that's what I've been doing today. I've been putting dragons in the game.
As long as one of them's called Idris,
dragons.
Fine.
Well, it's in a sense, I've kept the economic part, because let's say that the five things, so there's a copper dragon, a stone dragon, an iron dragon, a coal dragon, and a gold dragon. So you still,
and of course, all of this could change. Like this is just like one snapshot of the game.
It could do. Although, I mean, I was putting it together to get out, and I think in my head it works really well. I think this could be really good, because basically what you've got now is each dragon's got its own abilities, and each turn you auction which dragons you're going to control.
I've come across that mechanism.
Oh, it's been done to death before, but there are some wrinkles that have never been done before. But I'm saying no more because I haven't even play tested it yet.
No, that's fine. It's cool.
See, there you go. You've got love for dragons already.
Yeah. One thing I picked at you from the beginning of this bit about conflict in games and wars and so on. You don't know what side people are on. Struggle of empires.
Yes.
You keep changing sides, and you have control over who's on your side and who's on your opponent's side, and it will differ from turn to turn in the game. That's a really interesting mechanic.
And that's the interesting thing that I hope comes out with the dragon thing, because there is combat in the game, but everybody bids on, if it ends up getting 2 dragons, and the dragons are kind of paired. So there's certain dragons that won't attack other dragons. So the red dragon won't attack the green dragon. So if I've got the red dragon and you've got the green dragon, we can't fight. Yeah? So what you actually have embedded in the auction is an alliance system. Mm-hmm. And it would be very interesting to see how that plays out, because what it means is, because you do the auction in 2 rounds. So everybody bids on one set of dragons, and then they bid on another set of dragons. So if I see that you've got a certain color of dragon and I don't want to fight with you, then if I get dragon that's paired with the dragon that you've got, you can't attack me.
Mhm.
So that should be quite interesting.
Hmm.
But we will see.
Yeah, I guess that would potentially even open up the road for someone to. I don't know if this could be a mechanism in the game of bidding on something to give it to someone else, or giving
that would just
someone.
add too much complexity. But
You do get that to an extent in Struggle of Empires.
Hmm.
In each turn, you can actually bid for someone else to do things, which is quite interesting.
yes, because you can give people money, can't you? I think.
And you can you set the which countries are going on which side next. So it's actually turn order you're bidding for, but you can put up a proposal that doesn't involve you at all, and bid lots of money to make it happen, because it forces the person that you want to be on the other side to be on the other side, or the same side. It has some very interesting aspects. I'm really pleased it got reprinted, and the reprint looks really pretty as well.
Well, this was already lining up to be a big topic, to be honest. And we've spent over half an hour, and we haven't even finished talking about our recent events and highlights.
No, we digressed.
Yes. Yes, yeah.
So, for those who are just joining us, we are just moving into our questionably quick questions. And if you have anything, then get them in literally within the next minute. My question for everyone is, what time is it? Where are you? I am in London, UK. Hammy, we are in the same time zone.
Yay! Martin, somewhere miles away.
It's 7:32 p.m. in the evening here. It was great. I've been doing quite a lot of podcasts and video stuff recently, and I was doing a Russian one, I think last month, and it was great because it was in the same time zone. And he sent me an email and he said, make sure you get the time zones right, because people have missed appointments because we're on different days. But it turned out it was in Vladivostok, and it's in the same time zone.
There you go.
Yeah. Didn't know people lived in Vladivostok, but anyway, there you go.
We do appear to have a question about games and goons.
Where are you? So, I am in London. Hammy, you are in the central of England. And where exactly in Australia are you, Martin?
I'm in a place called Cromehurst, which is just outside of... Cromehurst has got a population of about 3 people. Outside of Peachester, which has got a population of about 10 people, which is near a place called Beerwah, which has got the word beer in it, which is frustrating because we're having a month of not drinking this month. We do that every now and again. And which is about an hour north of Brisbane, next to the Glass Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah.
CD is, of course, from Wellington, who is 2 hours ahead of Martin. And Alex asks, are there any games about dragoons? I'm not sure what a dragoon is. This is slightly embarrassing.
A dragoon is a type of soldier. They really first came about during the 17th century, I think, maybe the 16th. They were troops armed with muskets that moved on horseback but fought on foot. So they were early mounted infantry with muskets. I don't think there are any games about dragoons. Not in that.
The closest would probably be a Polish winged hussar, because they got wings. They're not dragons.
That's true. Polish winged hussars do look vaguely dragon-like because they do have wings.
But they didn't fire muskets because
they had pistols.
They did. Yeah.
So maybe that could be a niche, Alex. If you want to make a game about dragoons, then go for it. There's another question from Alex who asks, if you could produce anything you liked from one trouser pocket on demand, what would you like to produce? I'm going to move myself, and so we can continue to go clockwise. So Martin, you are first.
I'm not sure I understand. So produce anything you like from one trouser pocket. So you mean have I got stuff in my trouser pocket? Or
I think it's like a bag of holding. Like you can get anything. So it might be you could get cheese, or you could get hazelnut yogurt, or you could get components for...
oh God, what do I need at the moment? It's a funny thing, actually, is that I don't really need a lot.
Like the obvious but boring answer is money.
It's very boring and a very obvious answer.
Actually, the thing we could do with at the moment is a fire. We thought there was fire in this house. Yeah, fire. We moved in here in December, which is summer over here, and so it's warm, and it's now going into winter. So we got because we're on a wood burner, so we got 2 cubic meters of wood delivered a couple of weeks ago. And I went downstairs to light the fire, and the fire's buggered. It all rusted through. So at the moment, we've got no fire. So I'd like a fire. I mean, we've gone to buy one, but it's not going to be fitted for like another month because there's hardly any fire, people who fit fires, and they're completely maxed out. So yeah, a fire.
It's like throwing little fireballs out of a trouser pocket.
Yeah, that could end in tears, couldn't it? That would. Yeah, be careful. There we go.
I mean, if you're able to control the fire, I think that could be pretty powerful. How about you, Hammy?
I thought you didn't like magic.
I think that whilst money is the obvious and very dull one, I think it would be kind of cool to be able to pull just pull wine guns or midget gems or something useful like that out of your pocket. Obviously, clean, not dusty, because that'd be bad. Like the Doctor Who has jelly babies. I think something like that would be kind of cool.
But then you'd just be tempted to eat it all, get all the diabetes from all the sugar.
Yeah,
and
right.
I'm going to stick with the boring answer. I apologize.
You're gonna have money.
And if I'm not allowed a boring answer, then I would say quick drying cement. That seems very useful. But it only dries when it's out of the pocket, so it kind of comes down, and then I can make structures with it.
I think we could let you have the money as long as the currency it came out in was random, so that you pulled money out of your pocket, but it was in a random currency, and then you'd have to work out about transferring it into real useful money. That'd be quite interesting, wouldn't it?
That would be annoying. I feel like I just basically go into. You are just going to end up gaming the system. Go to converter, pulling out all this money until they're like, "Hey, what's going on?" And although maybe it's just random coins and it's really like 1 lira at a time, that wouldn't be very efficient. They'd probably get quite annoyed with you until you end up putting it all into a sack. And oh my gosh, this sounds very problematic. But that is the end of the questionably quick questions. Hello, Dutch Yoda. It is lovely to see you. And our final section is brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? Okay, let's talk about why are games a brilliant thing? We've talked about this a lot. It's kind of self-evident. I'm sure that anyone watching this thinks that games are brilliant, but your one reason why games are brilliant. Martin, why do you love games? Why do you still continue to design games?
Basically, games are great because I can make enough money from them so I don't have to have a proper job. It's awesome. It's just get up when I want, go to bed when I want, just do what the hell. Well, apart from when Julia's around, then I have to do housework. But when she's not around, I can do what I want. It's great. Come the zombie apocalypse, I fear that day when society descends into chaos and people don't require games anymore because they're totally superfluous. We don't need them. It's just like fancy cupcakes. It's a luxury that modern civilization can afford because it's already got everything else. So yeah, yay for superfluous games.
But I mean, if we did not have superfluous things, and I know there are still some people who are struggling, of course, to have clean drinking water and enough food, but and we do come from an immense place of luxury for sure. But having these luxuries, it does make life so much better.
I mean, games definitely bring happiness to people. If people didn't enjoy them, they wouldn't play them. And yeah, it's not as if people weren't playing games thousands of years ago in some form or other. So humans themselves are inherently playful. They enjoy games in some form or another, whether it be physical games or games of chance or strategy games. They have been around for millennia. It's just interesting at the moment when you have literally thousands of games being designed and published every year. It's just like, this is unprecedented. This has never happened before in the history of games. I mean, it's just incredible.
It's probably just going to continue to accelerate.
Yeah.
Realistically, it'll just accelerate.
Yeah, and it feels too much in a way. It's just, sometimes just feels a bit crazy. But in a sense, it was easier. And I suppose, returning to kind of like the WARFROG thing is when we first started back in the 90s, it was so much easier because there was hardly anybody publishing kind of heavier games. I think the only company in the UK back then would be the Ragnar brothers. In America, you had Avalon Hill and SPI specific, which is war games. And Avalon Hill didn't actually release that many games in a year. So there were very few what we would call these kind of strategy games around. And so you could get away with releasing crap in a white box and people would buy it because if there was just nothing else. But now it's just, I don't know how we would start now. I don't know how you would break through the kind of noise of so many different.
I think as a new designer, it's really hard to do. It's been done. A few people I'm aware of have done it from nothing and come on, and they've used Kickstarter the way it's meant to be used and got somewhere with it. But you're right. Back when we've gone away from brilliant things, but back when we started the WARFROG stuff, there might be 20 new games a year, if that were significant, and you could go to Essen and play every single one of them. Now, not a chance. Not a chance. There'll be games that came out you've never even heard of. Isn't it great? No.
Honestly, glimpsing every game at Essen is a challenge. Just literally looking at it, just spending 5 seconds looking at it.
I'll do my brilliant thing about games. My brilliant thing about games is it's a great way to meet people. I love going and socializing and being with other people, which is why the last year has been horrible. And why hopefully the next 6 to 9 months will be much better because I'll actually go and see people again. If we all share a similar interest in games, it's a great way of hooking up with meeting up with like-minded people. And gamers in general seem to be really cool people that I want to be with. So there you go.
I feel like games are intrinsically about freedom because games are about arbitrary rules that you've accepted. And so, but you've got to have some freedom in your life to be able to accept these rules. Do you know what I mean? And I think that is the brilliant thing about games, that fundamentally they're a reflection of the fact that in our real life, we don't have things dictated to us. Being able to say, yes, I'm going to accept the rules that I'm only allowed to place one piece at a time. I'm going to take turns with you. And when I surround your stones, then your stones get removed. And when you surround my stones, something as simple as that, accepting that. But then we've been free to do that. And it's kind of coming to it from a place of giving ourselves that agency, which frankly we might not have in our day-to-day world. Because
it's true. I mean, it's like, I always kind of think of life as a game, but the rules, nobody's written the rules down, so the rules are inexplicable. And I suppose it's interesting. That's one of the nice things about the games hobby, is that certainly for some people, I think it's a nice comfort zone because it's like, okay, here's an area where the rules are defined, where they are written down, and I know what they are. And I suppose what I'm alluding to is, people, for instance, with Asperger's who don't understand the rules of the game. They don't know how the world works because they just don't get it. Whereas if you've got a simple set of rules within the game, it's like, right, okay, I know what the rules are now. That's easy to understand. And I suppose it kind of connects to what Hammy says, about meeting friends. I always think gaming as a hobby is certainly in the UK, I'm not sure about America, but always felt very welcoming, and there was a whole range of different people. And it was kind of an area where people could go to be comfortable and not worry about being judged or, which is why I think you do get an interesting range of people in the hobby.
Yeah, you're really alluding to the clarity there, that you come in and what you're able to do is made to be clear. And I think there's a reason why there are often clearer codes of conduct in gaming circles than there are in... I mean, frankly, I think that the codes of conduct that I've seen entering Discord or going to board games convention can quite often put corporate environments to shame. And I think that it would be nice if there were that level of clarity elsewhere. But let's move on to the main topic of talking about how you got into publishing and publishing together. Everyone, of course, feel free to comment, ask questions, all that stuff. And so let's talk about how it all started.
Which is... So we're back to white boxes and Martin doing things at Essen, really.
I want to ask Martin, yes, how did you decide not just to become a publisher, but why did you even start to become a designer in the first place?
I've been asked this question many times, why did I want to become a designer? And I don't have an answer for that because I don't know why. All I know is when I've been playing games for a long time, since I was like 12 or 13 or something. So I always enjoyed games. So I had the gaming bug, but I had no desire to design games until I reached the age of about 28, 29. And it was just like a switch in my head said, oh, I'd like to be a game designer now. And like a lot of people who don't understand the industry, I had this stupid idea. I thought that you could make money from game designs, and that's rubbish. You can't. But
the only way to make a small fortune in the games industry.
Yeah.
Well, you've managed it.
After a hell of a lot of hard work. The thing is, the only reason, I've been doing this since 90. The first game I published was in 94. Only now am I in a reasonably financially comfortable position, and that is only because of Brass. It's the only thing that's making me money. And a little bit of money I get from Australia. I got a little bit of money from Australia. But, you look at the list of games I've done, most of them made buttons, really didn't make a lot of money. Even the games that you think you'd make a bit from, it's like the Anno 1800 game, maybe a couple of $1,000s. And you actually talk to a lot of designers and say the same thing. Most game designs that you work on, you make less than a minimum wage on. But it's a bit like with book publishing. People see the successes. They see the Richard Garfields, the Alan Moons, and Matt Leacocks, who do earn money because they have an evergreen. And design, generally you can only really be a full-time game designer if you've got an evergreen or something that keeps bringing the royalties in. Because the thing that worries me is like, well, at the moment, Brass is still making money, it's still selling. But as soon as that stops, it's like, well, what's going to replace that? Because I've got a mortgage now, don't have a pension yet. So at the moment, I'm rapidly working on a project to fill the brass-shaped hole that's going to come down the line in the next couple of years.
Yeah, it can be difficult, and I guess that fear of your big seller drying up for whatever reason.
Well, the sales will always decline to a certain degree. You can't, it's just surprised me, actually, the fact that Brass has continued to sell the way it has. It just utterly mind-bending. It's like, what the hell is that about? Because normally most games, as Hammy will tell you, normally you do one print run and you're done. I mean, that was certainly the way with WARFROG, Treefrog. You printed 3,000 units and you crossed your fingers that you were going to sell them all, because it was not a guarantee to sell 3,000 units. And that back then was the minimum quantity to allow you to do full color printing.
It was the minimum quantity to get a sensible price for full color printing.
Yes. Yeah.
You could do fewer, but it was expensive.
Yeah.
Now, compared to other things, I don't know, I assume this was the second edition that you mentioned.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is the back of the box here, uploaded by user Carrot here, who's allowed people to share it. So thank you very much for that. But originally, what made you this? You just have no idea. It was just some sort of compulsion, and you felt the raging desire in your blood to make these things when you turned 29.
Yeah, and I think also because I started by designing war games because that's all I knew. But a friend of mine who I met when I was working at Games Workshop back in the 80s, he got into Euro games, and I started playing these Euro games, and that was a real eye-opener. So again, this is back in the 90s, early 90s. And suddenly it's like, oh, wow, there's a different way of designing games, because all I knew was SPI and Game Design Workshop and stuff like that. And suddenly you see these simple, elegant German games, and that just made me think, yeah, that's interesting. And now that's always been kind of my groove, is trying to combine the elegance of the German school with the content of the Ameritrash school. So that's kind of the line I've all followed since. So yeah, that was a big inspiration on me, big influence on me. Yeah,
I think the game that Hammy showed earlier, Age of Arguments, I think that might actually, going by Board Game Geek, I think it might be your 10th game, which is
something like that. I lose
incredible.
Track. And it's for the people who've joined late. This is Age of Arguments in its marvelous white box.
Yeah. Without wanting to too much to talk, I will tell you an interesting story about the early days of WARFROG. Before the one you just showed, the Laws of Creation, before then, most of the games I did, they were like that. They were that standard. And I think it was the second year. So we'd gone to Essen with the first edition of Laws of Creation. And then the second year we went with 1630 something and Stockers, which were printed. So the quality was slightly better. But then I ran out of money because I was separating from my partner at that point, and I needed to move into a flat, and the money just disappeared, as it tends to do. So then I had to go back to kind of hand-making games. And I think it must have been the third year, and I did these two games called Goblin Kings and Medieval Empires. And as I say, they were all basically handmade. And I was sharing this house with a couple of young girls, a couple of professional young girls. I was sharing a house in Parswood. And the thing was, I was mounting the paper. I'd color paper, printed to color paper, and then I'd stick it onto mounting board so that you could, you had a counter sheet. And I was using, the spray glue. You get
oh yes, quite often in art school we ended up using hairspray, because apparently that can sometimes work better with modern hairsprays.
Well, I wasn't aware of that then. Anyway, so I'm there in my room, and I'm
Things
making
might have changed in the past.
Hundreds of copies of these games, and I'm using umpteen cans of spray mount. I'm just going through so many cans of spray mount, it's unbelievable. So the girls get back from work and they come to the house and they knock on my door and say, Martin, why is the whole house sticky? Everywhere. everywhere in the house is sticky because this stuff gets everywhere. So it's like floors are sticky, upstairs are sticky, everywhere you put your fingers. It's sorry, that might have been me. But anyway, this funny story from the early days of WARFROG. But yeah, we could get away with selling that stuff then. No way could you get away with doing it then. But the version you saw there, the Laws of Creation, is, as I say, we're kind of hobbling on and things weren't great. But then, and I think it was that third year, and this is before Hammy came along, and the guys I'd gone over there, Tim and Simon, they were saying to me, look, you need to call this. This is not working. Things are just on a downward trajectory. You should just call it and stop wasting money on this. And I agreed with them. I said, yeah, this is the end of the road. And then just at that point, there's a couple of guys turned up who had met the previous year, a couple of guys who owned a shop in the Netherlands called the Jokers, Ron and Erno. And they turned up and said, look, we really like your games and we'd like to put money into your company. And all of a sudden, the sun came out and said, oh, brilliant. So they put the money up to do the reprint of Laws of Creation. Then that kind of didn't work out because the game got misprinted. So we had almost nothing to sell the following year because that. Then it came out the following year from that. But that was the first full color game we got. And then things started, they pulled out because that wasn't working out. And then that's when Hammy came on board for 2000, and Hammy and another girl, Carl Baum, ponied up the money so that we could do a full color print run. And we did two games.
Two games.
The Ancient World and Way Out West. And that's when we started doing full color. And that was kind of the start of the new WARFROG, and which continued for a number of years.
We've got mounted boards. We've got wooden pieces.
Yeah.
We've got nice cards with pictures of artwork, of proper artwork on them. This is like, this is a game that wouldn't be totally out of place even now. And that was published in 2000. Yeah. Basically the Mordred year, which we mentioned right at the beginning, where Martin had gone back to very much white box and done Mordred, which is a great game, but the publishing was terrible. We were, myself and some of the other guys from Manchester who are Martin's testers and friends, kind of saying to him, you mustn't do this again, Martin. Next year, you've got to do something a little bit better. It's got to be at least as good as a Winsome game, which is asking much, but we were determined to do that. And there was a bit of going backwards and forwards, and maybe it was going to happen, maybe it wasn't. 6 months passed and nothing more was heard. But then Martin, I think you had talked to Carl and got Carl on board to do a game. But Martin had decided that if we're going to do things properly, more than one game was a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know where that idea came from.
It worked.
You put the money in for Empires the Ancient World, and Carl put the money in for Way Out West.
Yeah, as it happened, thanks to the way that the world of working as a contractor worked at that point, I had some money in my company that I could either pay myself and cop up 40-odd% tax on, or invest in a business project. And I happened to think, why not? I mean, I've been at that point, 2000. I've been a gamer since. I've been a gamer for getting on for 30 years. Then I'd not been involved in publishing any games, but I'd been involved in running conventions. I'd been involved in developing and playtesting games for Harry Rowland. I'd done all sorts of stuff, but not board game publishing. And Martin said, yeah, cool, why don't we do this? And initially, my involvement was mainly reaching into the bank account, finding a load of money. Martin sourced all the printing and so on. And gradually, over the period, I picked up more and more bits and pieces of the money side of it. And the talking to the factory where the games were stored, and they're trying to get reorders from distributors and so on. But basically, we put in Carl and I put in money for those two games to start with. A year on, we'd sold almost enough to be able to pay for the next print run, just about, for the next game. And the following year, we did Liberté. which also did quite well. And there were still sales of Empires of the Ancient World and Way Out West. Although Way Out West, because it was a mass market game, whereas Empires was not, we did 4,000 copies of Way Out West.
Yeah, and we sold 3, didn't we? Yeah,
we sold 3.
Easy to, you know.
The last 1,000 really never went. They just sat in a warehouse, and eventually, I don't know what happened to them. They might have got sold off for buttons, but they were overproduced. It was overproduced because the logic said, well, it's more of a mass market game. It should sell more copies, and it didn't. Liberté, we did 3,000. Carl at that point had to kind of dropped out. He got most of his money back, I think, but still technically owned all the Way Out Wests. And eventually, I believe he at least got what he put in back. The Liberté did well enough that a year in to that, when we did the next game, which was Age of Steam, we had enough money within the business to be able to pay for the game without me reaching into my pocket again and doing stuff. And we also still had stock. And the deal that Martin and I had was that I would pay Martin from a share of the profit, and I kept track of where the profit was likely to be, so Martin could get money up front and earlier, because I was fortunate.
I was always poor.
Always. Yeah, Martin was always poor, and I wasn't. So it didn't matter to me that I wasn't getting the profit from the game, as long as the game's business was able to manage itself. Yeah, that's the reprint of Liberté.
Yeah, the Valley Games. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got an original Liberté here. This is the WARFROG one. By this stage, where were we with WARFROG games? We're looking at, we've still got a mounted board. We've got loads of wooden pieces. We've got more decks of cards with reasonable graphics on them. I mean, it's a good game, and it sold quite well. And Age of Steam did very well. Age of Steam sold out within a year.
Yes.
Can't remember what we did the year after Age of Steam, but we did another one.
The game after Age of Steam was Struggle of Empires.
No, it was Princes the year after Age of Steam.
Oh, no, Princes.
Princes of the Renaissance, yeah.
Yes.
Was the next one. And then we did Struggle of Empires and reprinted Age of Steam. Yes. And so on. And it kept growing as a business. And this is something I mentioned when I discussed with Bez first time around, which was that when it started out, you know, I'm putting a big chunk of money in, and Martin's putting a huge amount of time and effort because he's doing all the design, he's designing and sorting out all the artwork and all that kind of thing. And we have got a number of friends who help play test, all from the Manchester area, regular play testers, regular developers, effectively. And they would come along to Essen to help out. And the first year at Essen, they actually paid their own way completely. They paid their own hotel rooms, their own flights, and they just helped out from the goodness of their part, which was fantastic. And the
Shall we
following
tell an
year,
Essen story?
Go on.
Because the 2000 one, that was the year. Do you remember?
Was that the year we broke Pevens?
That was the year that we killed Pevens.
Oh, yes, good story.
Pevens?
Okay, do you know Pevens, Paul Evans?
Okay, I've heard of Paul Evans.
Work as a journalist for Small Furry Creatures Press.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think this is it was 2000 because Hammy came up. Because we're doing the full colour games, there was a bigger crowd of us than normal because there was a guy called Rob. Do you remember Rob Mulholland?
Yeah.
Yeah, he came over as well because he and Jeff got a whole load of cowboy hats. Jeff Brown, because he was working for a company that sold hats, so he got a whole load of cowboy hats. So we were pushing the boat out. And we were all staying in this hotel, the Young. And we've been there a couple of times before. And there was this, over the years, there's this ritual that developed at this restaurant just across from the Young called the Croatian Steakhouse, where after you've finished your meal, you'd have a round of slivovitz. Have you ever had slivovitz, Bez? Do you know what slivovitz is?
I've never heard of sliverbits.
Okay, so slivovitz is Croatian plum brandy. Okay, and it's disgusting. It is like drinking petrol. It is awful. But the thing is,
strong, I guess.
We're youngish and crazy. We developed this routine where we had multiple rounds of slivovitz, and you would have to gargle with it, or you'd have to sluice it. You'd have to extract the maximum amount of nastiness from it. You couldn't just neck it. So that over the years, that became a thing. So, but this particular night, I'd been to the Croatian, but then there was a group of them over there. But then I left them because I had to go back to the hotel because I was meeting with the editor of a big German games magazine, Matthias Hardell, because I was showing the game. So I was relatively sober. Went back to the hotel, and then a couple of hours later, Jeff, Pevins, and the rest of the gang came, and they just stayed at the hotel drinking endless rounds of slivovitzes. And literally, Pevins came in, and he was talking in tongues.
No, he wasn't. I understood what he was saying.
He was just blah, 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 blah. And it's like, he didn't look drunk. He just was just talking in words you couldn't understand. So I just kind of ignored him.
Or rather, Martin couldn't understand, and apparently Hammy could.
Maybe.
He was very upset about how he'd been mistreated by some horrible German person in the cocktail bar that he'd gone to after the restaurant.
So this hotel had a night porter, and I don't know, 2 hours later, something like this, a night porter comes and says, we can't get into the ladies' toilets. Okay, fine. Eventually we get in, and Pevins is in there, unconscious in a pool of his own vomit, just head on the toilet, and we just really bad. And we ended up having to get the paramedics in. He ended up being taken to hospital with acute blood poisoning, alcohol poisoning. So Jeff, being mother hen, goes down the following day to look after him. So I'm back at the hotel, and the receptionist comes up and says, oh, Mr. Wallace, I hear one of your party was taken to hospital last night. This is terrible news. How's he doing? And I just looked at her and said, oh, he died. What? I was like, yeah, he passed away. And she just beside us. I just couldn't help myself.
I do remember that. I remember the poor
yeah. Anyway, so Jeff went down to the hospital to check on Pevins, and Pevins came around, and Pevins was like, where am I? And Jeff's there, and Pevins was due to go back to the UK that day. And the thing is his passport, I think, had fallen down the toilet when he was being sick in it. He didn't have his passport. And Jeff said, well, look, do you remember which hotel you're staying at? And Pevins says, I don't remember. I don't know which hotel I was at. And eventually Jeff managed to get it sorted out. But since then, Pevins always stays in the same hotel as us, so that if that ever happens again, we can get him back to the right hotel. God's honest truth.
We did break it.
I would have thought that the lesson there wouldn't be make sure I stay at the same hotel as these people, but rather to drink less liver bits.
Oh, no. I mean, another ritual that we started with whiskey night, where everybody. Did you ever do whiskey night, Hammy?
I'm not a whiskey drinker, so I saw whiskey night from a distance and appreciated what you were doing. Yeah. Now, if it had been gin night, that would have been different. But no.
Yeah, but we used to do so. People would bring along bottles of whiskey, and we'd be drinking whiskey till about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, at this point, my now wife and then partner was coming along, and she used to get really annoyed on whiskey night. So I think there was one whiskey night where I had to sleep on the landing because I'd actually collapsed on the stairs, and Julia didn't open the door for me, so I actually slept on the landing. And I had an interview the next day with a French magazine. It was a video interview, and I actually fell asleep in the interview. I was just so gone. I just started snoring. It's like, oh, done. Wow. And the following year, these people came up and they said, oh, we've done this article. We've got these pictures of me. And there's this picture of me looking like this. Ooh. And she was like, surely you had better pictures. And they're like, that was the good picture. That was the best picture. So yeah, we had many memorable nights, usually alcohol related.
Or some nights, I guess, that were forgotten. And thanks for joining Designer Cardboard to suggest that maybe Pevins was breaking himself. rather than it being all just because of your influence?
We were a bad influence, a very bad influence.
Yeah, it was good fun there, but it was interesting because, as I say, we did end up booking this hotel, and basically we reserved all of the rooms in the hotel, every single room. So that meant that everybody in that hotel we knew, and it was like having a convention away from home. It's great. You could walk down in the breakfast room in the morning, and you would know everybody in the room. And similarly at night, people would come back with the games that they bought, and they'd be playing them in the breakfast room. And so it meant, because I generally don't play games at Essen, because I'd much rather be out drinking than playing games. But it did mean that you could wander around the room and talk to the various people playing the games and just get an idea of what's good and what's not good, because that was great. Those are really good days. And what we used to do is you used to start getting companies like from America or Canada or Australia, people coming over, and because they get in contact with us, and we'd look after them. So it's like the Valley Games, who ended up doing Liberté. We put them up in a hotel, and we held their hands and explained Essen to them, because it's a bit scary the first time you go to Essen, how to do it. And so we did that, I think, a number of times to different companies.
It became the young hotel became the almost the English language centre for games companies, games publishers. It was brilliant. I mean, it was a fantastic period, because it was the developmental period of where we've got to now. It's a very different environment now, because the scale's so much bigger. But yeah, it was brilliant fun. And I got to count. Effectively, I didn't get paid, but I didn't do bad. I made some money out of it. Could have made more, but didn't.
I'd like to actually get back to your involvement with this, Hammy. And I am observing that I had a few scheduled tangents planned, but we haven't even got into the first one, and then I'm loving all the stories, but it might be that we need to come back maybe sometime in July to finish off the story with everything. Yeah, if you are willing.
Maybe we'll try and get to the end of WARFROG rather than do WARFROG and Treefrog.
But I want to ask you, because this was something that Hammy brought up, about the nature of an artistic business separation. But before we get to that, Hammy, what exactly were you doing? Was it literally just the money? I mean, Martin, were you actually taking care of all the logistics? Because I thought there was a wee bit more last time we spoke, Hammy, that you were doing a bit more of the organisation and whatnot.
I got more and more involved in the organisation as time went on. Early on with the WARFROG stuff, the logistics were dead easy, because that was all down to Ludofact just delivering it to our stand. Basically, Martin organised the print. The Ludofact are fantastic, amazing company, and they stored all the WARFROG games. We never had a WARFROG warehouse. We never had a WARFROG premises. It was effectively a virtual company. The only time it ever had any real estate was a stand at Essen. And other than that, it would be...
You got all your thousands of copies and you sold out in just one show.
No, the ones that didn't sell stayed at Ludofact, in the warehouse at Ludofact. And
because we also sold, because at that point we're also beginning to sell reasonable chunks of Fun again, weren't we? So we'd get rid of, because that was our way into America.
Yeah, we sold stuff to American distributors. Yeah. But originally, out of the 3,000 copies of Empires of the Ancient World, probably 300 or 400 sold at Essen, maybe something like that. We made an effort going around retailers at Essen to sell boxes or multiple boxes of games onto retailers that would then go out into the market. And Martin had contacts with a number of distributors, so we would sell stuff into distributors in bigger lots that went direct from Ludofact. But the warehousing, the games were sitting in a warehouse at Ludofact, and there was a Ludofact storage charge that we paid a monthly storage charge to Ludofact for however many pallet loads we had. And each year for the Essen Fair, we would get a delivery on a truck on the Wednesday or whatever of the Essen Fair with what we thought we might sell that year plus what we might end up taking home. But in the early days, we were largely flying over, so we weren't able to take very much home. And my whole involvement in WARFROG, the whole period I was involved in WARFROG, no, not true. The last year we had a van. And we bought a bunch of stuff back over.
Yeah, because I think Stuart drove the van over, didn't he?
Yeah, I remember the van. I remember getting the van onto my drive and having some stuff that we were taking back in. But it gradually stepped up the business side. So initially, it was mainly I was involved in paying the money and chasing the bills, and paying the bills and chasing the payment, the invoices, and sorting things like tax and VAT and accountancy and boring stuff and pay. And then gradually over time, paying for hotels, sorting out air flights. And it just gradually grew. If you get into the Treefrog period, where I was working full-time at Treefrog, that involved organising transport from the UK to Germany of multiple pallets of stuff, getting it so that it was coming in waves, so we didn't get it all arriving before the show because there wouldn't be enough room on the stand for all the games we wanted, getting extra deliveries, and so it stepped up over time. But really, with the WARFROG period, it went up. Then I dropped out, and then I came back in with Treefrog and picked up almost where I left off, I think.
Yes.
And the WARFROG, when WARFROG got to the point where it was able to, the WARFROG designs were able to look after themselves, and somebody else could do the business side of it. And the primary reason I dropped out from being in the WARFROG side, and we had some pretty heavy meetings in pubs in Manchester where we were trying to discuss where we were going to go and the future of the company and so on. Because I was getting, in theory, 50% of the profit, and Martin was getting 50% of the profit, and we were selling all the games in no time flat, I felt that it was perceived that I was getting a load of money for doing nothing. I mean, I was doing work, not as much as Martin. Martin did far more work than I did. And I'd taken a gamble with a big chunk of money at the start, but I got that money back. And I kind of just felt that at that point I had to drop out. And then, because it was causing real problems with friends, with people who, and it may not have been a real problem. It might just have been, I felt it was causing problems with friends. It was we could have afforded to pay their flights and the hotel bills for everybody coming to help out on the stand. No problem at all. But if we did that, that turns them from friends to employees in their heads.
Yes.
And they didn't want me to do that. So I was doing the other thing, but you can't give them a split of the profit. It just didn't work. So on the basis that at that point, I felt that my money and time was no longer needed in the business, I stepped back and let Martin pick up everything that was. WARFROG really was only ever a game every year. It was whatever Martin designed for that year's Essen, and that was Martin's game. And the plan was always that WARFROG would only ever print the 3,000 copies, apart from Age of Steam, which we did twice. And after those 3,000 copies have been printed by WARFROG, if Martin wanted to sell the design to another company to be printed on, it's Martin's design, he can do whatever he wants with it. We've proved the concept. And obviously, Age of Steam, Liberté, Princes of the Renaissance, Brass, they've all been published subsequently, and they've done reasonably well. And it's not... Yeah, we were kind
of... So my
question
is... like, Martin, how much, it sounds like that money, the financial inputs was essential to keep it going. And without that, I don't want to overstate it, but would you have continued to be able to design and self-publish, or would you not be designing games today if it wasn't for Hammy's involvement? And the other question is, like, even though Hammy, you kind of say, oh, it's the tax and the VATs and paying the bills, but kind of having someone who's able to take care of that. And myself, I know that when I've got someone else that I can speak to about things, it just helps so much. So the question is, Martin, from your perspective, what was Hammy bringing to it, and would you have kept going if it wasn't for Hammy's involvement, frankly?
Well, say that the main thing is I'm not a businessman. I'm terribly disorganized. I hate doing accounts. I mean, I really, really hate doing accounts. I hate paperwork. I just want to do the creative bit because that's the interesting bit. So yeah, Hammy, help doing those things around the creative bit, and as well, playtesting and development work and so on. Because you can't operate in a vacuum. I suspect what happened was because I'd started seeing Julia at that point, and eventually, I know with Treefrog, I mean, certainly Julia. Even now, Julia keeps tab on my accounts. She's the one who keeps receipts and makes sure that the paperwork is in order come tax time. So that certainly took the pressure off, because if I'd been left to my own devices, then if I was just working on my own, then I would have probably crashed and burned.
I mean, you did there were still WARFROG games after I backed out. Yes, Pericles came out, and I'm not
Byzantium.
sure. Byzantium and Pericles were the two that were after I stepped back.
And then Brass, and then that's when I had the idea, because I was still doing supply teaching at that point, and money was still very tight. It was just, everything was a struggle, and that's when I had the idea for Treefrog. And where that came from was actually Mordred, because I'd done Julia's daughter Hannah had a liver transplant when she was 6 months old. And you're probably wondering where this story is going, and we needed to raise money. So she was part of this kind of transplant game, so we needed to raise money for her to travel overseas to go to this event in Bangkok. And I remember having this bright idea, I'll do a limited print run game and we'll use the profits from that. And because it's for charity, there's a tax benefit. And so I did a 1,000 unit reprint of Mordred. And that gave me the idea for Treefrog, in that it's like, if I cut down on the printed material, it becomes viable to do a lower print run. So rather than doing 3,000, you can get away with 1,500. And at 1,500, you can aim to sell most of them direct. And hence, so basically, it was an early form of Kickstarter in a sense. And that's what allowed me to give up teaching, because I could do 3 games a year, sell them direct, and make a lot more money from each unit sale. But then as that got bigger, I realized, I'm struggling to handle the financial side, the accountancy side, the organizational side. And that's when I asked Hammy to come back on board, because it was just too much for me on my own. I mean, originally with the Treefrog stuff, I was even, because all the games would be delivered to a unit in Manchester and then Stockport. And then I think even with the first ones, to save money, I even collated the wooden pieces myself. Did you?
Oh, I did plenty of collating wooden.
Yeah.
I had the joy of when I got involved with Treefrog. Martin was in a little business unit in an industrial area just down the road from me, and I turned up, and it's like, oh my God, Martin, you've got a lot of stuff here. Yeah, all right. Martin, why have you got all these black cubes? Oh, I got the Norths wrong when I placed the order for the black cubes. But Martin, there's about 150,000 black cubes in this box that you don't need. I bought too many. We did, when we did Wensleydale, and there were 2 games that we did at the same time. One was Last Train to Wensleydale, and I can't remember what the other one was.
Is that the reason for the black cubes of pain? Because he bought 150,000?
No, black cubes got used in a lot of Martin's designs.
Everything gets reused. Nothing was wasted eventually.
there was this enormous plastic box. It must be, it was about 2 foot by 18 inches by 3 foot deep, full of black cubes, of the little tiny black cubes. And they were one of the components that we needed for the next games. And I did a bit of a check through all of the games, the 2 games we were going to be doing. And what we discovered was that actually those two games, we already had something like 50% of the components that we needed just sitting there in the warehouse. And that, when I say 50% of the components, in terms of individual bits of wood, it was 500,000 pieces of wood that we had in the warehouse. So normally, or going forward from there, we actually got the pieces counted for us because it's soul destroying. It is just horrible.
It's too much.
But we actually we collated all the pieces for 2 or 3 games just to get this massive stock of components down to sensible levels. We did get 2 pallets of wood delivered for the other half the components. So 2 whole pallets of wood came from wood suppliers. It's a lot of bits of wood. Those games were
honestly, I get annoyed just. Okay, to be fair, I do a little quick doodle on them, but I get annoyed just packing envelopes. Once I've done like a few hundred of them, I can't imagine, putting wooden bits and counting out approximately, whatever number you need. And for 1,000,
we were doing 1,500 copies. We'd done a game, and we decided the first game we were going to put the components in ourselves. We got a shrink wrap machine so that we could shrink them when they were done. Also, there were a lot of them were signed, numbered and signed. I think they were all original.
They were all numbered and signed, yeah. And I had that person, obviously.
Yeah. So we knew we were getting this game shipped from Germany, and we were going to put the wooden components in and then shrink wrap it. And we asked the factory not to shrink wrap it. And this is something that turns up sometimes on the gaming forums. Why don't we do away with shrink wrap? The games came across from Germany, in their cases, brand new, made by the factory. The factory was saying, we really want to shrink wrap them. No, we don't want to shrink wrap them. Please don't shrink wrap them. It's wasteful. We're only going to be taking the shrink off and re-shrinking them. And they arrived. And because when you put games in boxes, the boxes aren't completely tight. There's a little bit of movement. The games are sliding against each other slightly as they move along. And out of 1,500 games, maybe 20 or 30 were damaged. The boxes were worn to the point that your average gamer would be very unhappy about seeing that as a new game. So, yes, the shrink wrap was unnecessary, but actually it protects the games and means that when they get to us so that we can put the plastic, but the components in, they're still pristine. What that meant was the next orders came along. We got them shrink wrapped. Went, okay, to the games. Okay, to Ludofact, please shrink wrap them. Send us the games shrink wrapped. We've then got to unshrink wrap them, put the components in, and then re-shrink wrap them. I've got loads of games still in shrink. I take my games to get to conventions, and the games I've got still in shrink. Somebody wants to borrow a game, and they go, but it's still in shrink. Won't you want to open it? No. Why would I want to open it? I've opened so many games in my life because I've opened thousands of games. I'm sick of opening games. And yes, we got the games. We were counting the bits out. We then we moved on. The wooden components were coming. Sometimes it was most of the wood because we still had bits of wood left in the enormous box of black cubes and other things. But you got a bag with all the plastic components in it. We got a pair of drug dealer scales, the super accurate scales that measure to 0.01 of a gram or whatever. And you'd imagine that if you get a bag of wooden components and weigh it, that they'll all be the same. No, wood's a natural product. It's not all the same weight. If you get 3 bags that have all got exactly the same bits of wood in them, they won't weigh the same weight. And what we ended up having to do with the components was we got
internally some bits are going to be a bit more dense and some bits less so.
Lighter, and they don't weigh exactly the same. When you've got 300 bits of wood in a bag, it's very so. We ended up with a sort of, if it's above this or below that, then we've got to check it. But if it's in the middle, then we'll assume it's good. And even so, you still got components being. It's just a nightmare. You get a set of components where the person packing them has obviously just forgotten to put these 4 pieces in, or they've put these 4 pieces in twice. and
It's right. So something like 10% of a print run could be
An
faulty.
error is going to pop up when you are, frankly, such a small production unit doing things between. I mean, presumably you got a few friends, and Xenofuel is in the comments. I appreciate your appreciation, but as far as insights go, it doesn't feel like something that would necessarily be done today.
No. I mean, now I think things have moved on. We were one step up from cottage industry. This is Treefrog. WARFROG was really a true. It was a hobby company, really, wasn't it? The original WARFROG. Martin was still working, and I was working, and it was done in spare time. But we were still the biggest publisher in the UK at the time.
Yes. The interesting thing, going back to Treefrog, when you say it couldn't be done now, it actually couldn't be done now. And there are a number of reasons that might surprise you. But number one is they've privatized the post office. And when we were operating, I used to get phone calls. So this is when they were still nationalized. I used to get phone calls from the post office saying, we'd like to reduce your postage costs. We've got these ideas. And it got to the point where we had a warehouse where the post office would supply bags, the big mail bags, and we would pre-sort the boxes, the packages. So it's like, all down to the point where these are going in the San Francisco bag, these are going in the New York bag, these are going in the Germany bag. And so we would pre-sort them, and we were paying rock bottom prices for postage. Really, really good postage rates. So we could afford to send everything out from the UK and not have to charge a fortune for postage. Couldn't do that now. No way could you, because postage prices have gone up massively. And I'm not sure if the privatized post office works in that same way of trying to reduce your costs.
Well, they'll try and be helpful, I think, and I think you might get that, but I don't think you get the same. But you're right, postage prices are frightening. Posting internationally is really difficult now. I think
individual workers are helpful, but speaking as someone who, soon after COVID, I sent a few things to America, and they didn't know that the price was going to jump up so massively. I think some things that were literally about £5 something to sell one week were literally, I think it was about £15 the next week, which was, and what could I do? It could be a better part of a year before prices return to normal. So given that it was a few copies, I ate that cost, frankly. And someone actually said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I feel now guilty backing your Kickstarter." I said, "Oh, no, definitely don't feel that way. I still really appreciate it. I might have ended up losing money on some of the things, but how can you do that?" Sorry. And Stream Elements reminds us to stretch around it occasionally.
So I suppose the other thing, though, is Treefrog kind of started up. Kickstarter, I don't think was a thing when Treefrog started.
No, it wasn't. Treefrog was way before Kickstarter. When did Kickstarter start?
I think it wasn't. It was probably soon after. I'm sure 2009, 2010, something
April
like that.
2009 Kickstarter.
Right. Okay.
It was pretty small to start with. It didn't get big until a little later.
But the thing is, though, back at Treefrog, we did almost no advertising. I mean, we did a few board game geek ads, and that was it. We didn't do much social media or anything like that because there was no need to. And you could sell, you could sell out the games that you produce because
you started on 1,500 print runs, and actually before I finished with Treefrog, we were up to 3,000 unit print runs.
So there was some that, because we kind of.
We went to 1,000 limited with 1,000 signed with the extra wooden bits, and 2,000 with just card. So
Yes.
basically, the games were changed. One of the challenges that we had with Treefrog, I'll put my retailer hat on here now. We sold to retailers, and we gave retailers decent discounts. And the games were only ever going to be a 1,500 print run, and it massively annoyed us that retailers were taking these games and then selling them at a discount. Why? They just were, because that's what they did. They were selling limited edition signed copies of Treefrog games at a discount, which means that it's just silly. So we came up with...
Can you empathise with that now that you're a retailer? Or
I understand why retailers do it. I just don't see the point, because, that's the whole retailers thing is a totally separate thing. There's one retailer that's just had a sale over the last weekend. They normally do 25% off on board games. And they were doing a deal over the weekend where if you bought 3 extra games, you get another 10%. 4 extra games, you got 15%. And 6 games, you got 25% extra. So you're getting 50% off retail. That's less than they pay for them. They're obviously desperate for money.
It's just liquidating stock.
Basically what we did was we changed from 1,500 copies, where we were selling about 1,000 direct as Treefrog and 500 into retail. We upped to 3,000 copies, but we made it so each game had card components for the whole game, and then there was an upgrade pack for the 1,000 copies that were the Treefrog copies. And the upgrade pack, you got a sticker with a numbered sticker that was signed, stuck on the back of the box, and you got wooden components for a chunk of the bit. So that was like a Kickstarter deluxe game, effectively. And they were only available direct from Treefrog and at full retail. And the other games, the other 2,000 were sold. We'd sell into distribution and retail, because Treefrog originally wasn't going to distribution at all. And the extra games allowed Treefrog to sell the other units into distribution. And that was things like London was done on that line, I think.
Sort of, yeah.
I guess the generic bits were the ones that you put into the deluxe add-on pack, essentially, where you could just get them from your big bucket, but it was the things that actually had to be printed, where you get a bit of a better price by printing 3,000.
Yes.
That's what went into all the standard
you reduce
editions.
your art costs. I tell you a scary thing I'd forgotten. See, because there's still quite a lot of money required up front to do the printing, we started what was called a subscription model. So what we say is, right, we're going to do 3 games a year, and we offered people who are interested a subscription. So I think they might have got a discount or something like that. So what it meant was they were guaranteed to get a copy of every game. So they were basically paying for 3 games up front. I remember there was one subscription, and the 3rd game was A Few Acres of Snow. And I hadn't even designed it at that point. So I was taking money for a game that I'd not designed. Which is a bit scary when you think about it. Fortunately, it turned out okay.
Well, come on, Martin. Princes of the Renaissance didn't exist at the Essen before we released it.
No. I almost canned that one because it was just going nowhere. And I remember one playtest where I changed the bidding system and it suddenly clicked into place. And I remember there was a Dutch guy. He was a game designer. I'm trying to remember his name now. I remember I got a message back from him because he picked up a game and he took it back to Holland, and it must have been start of the email. Yeah, email. And he said, "This game is better than sex." I'm thinking maybe you're not doing it right, but anyway.
But that was a game that went from nothing to published at Essen and getting rave reviews in 10 months.
Yes,
11 maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
And Dutch Yoda says, by the way, the Netherlands, not Holland.
Okay, Holland. Okay, fine. Sorry, the Netherlands. Yeah. Slap. Yeah.
Thank you for that input, and also thank you for the kind words, Designer Cardboard. But let's although I'd love to have you back on if you fancy, I think we should get into the scheduled tangents, the side questions that I was going to ask. So firstly, the nature of the artistic business separation. Do you think it's essential? I mean, like Jamie Stegmaier has their Alan Stone, Martin Wallace had their Hammy. Do you think it's essential to have? And Cesar basically was never a good designer. Sorry, Cesar. You know, so I don't think Cesar's going to slap me for saying that, but Cauldron Master and Lab Wars sold very well because Cesar's a really good business person and really good at marketing. And now, do you think we need to have that separation, like whether it's two different selves or two different people ideally? Do you think we need to have a team to make a successful
not all designers were. I don't know. Does Harry have somebody that does the business side for him? Harry Rowland, I'm thinking, because I think he does all of it.
No, because every time I meet him, he's bitching because he's having to do a tax return. So he has to do a lot of it himself. And the thing is, and it's a lot of work for him because he stupidly designed the biggest game in the world, as is officially in the Guinness Book of Records. So
biggest hard-mounted board of a game in the world. Yeah,
it requires, it requires a massive degree of upkeep. He has to do a lot of work to keep that beast running. And I know that he'd love to pass it off to somebody else, but who the hell's going to take that on?
Sorry,
why is it beast just because it's a big board? Is it just?
Hang on a second.
That's just more warehousing.
World in Flames is the biggest board game in the world. So it's the second.
I understand this, but it's just like, okay, you get some warehouse fulfillment company to.
Well, no, because he does expansion.
It counts as the biggest board game in the world. It doesn't look that big, but what makes it the biggest board game in the world by the Guinness Book of Records is the mounted board.
You're going to have to step back for this, Hammy.
Yeah, you have to.
I will.
Maybe back to Congleton or something like that, so you can.
So hang on a minute. It comes with a counter sheets. It's a hex and counter game, and that's the counter. Oh no, hang on. There's more. So that's all the counter sheets, and then the board is 4 of these. Hang on a minute. Can we see?
Is there? And there's one more fold. Yep, there we go.
So that's a quarter of the board.
Can you lift it up slightly? Okay,
yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
Hello, there's Australia. There's where I live.
It's not. There are bigger games because.
Yeah, but I still don't understand. And hopefully, if I don't understand, I'm hoping that this is useful to someone else in the comments, because genuinely, I understand. Okay, people expect expansions. I understand there's a creative desire to keep making these expansions. Understand it's going to. Why is this difficult from a business, logistical, organizational point of view?
Right. So, okay, this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. It kind of ties back to the Bloodstones thing, because Treefrog originally, the wheels fell off Treefrog because I moved to New Zealand, and it was just impossible to run the thing at a distance because just couldn't. And also Kickstarter changed the world, and suddenly you had to do social media. And I don't do social media. It's just not in me to do that. So the wheels fell off that. So I decided to pivot to just design games, license them, get the royalties. That was my grand plan. And that's the line I've been taking. But I've now come to the conclusion that that doesn't work for me. So now I'm going back into publishing, because the joy of WARFROG and Treefrog was I could design what I wanted. And it meant that we did certain games which were just not commercially viable. But we could do them because it's our money. We can do with it what we want. So you could do themes that whatever took your fancy.
Every Treefrog game basically sold out.
Yeah. So, and the thing
not
is, you
all
can't.
were reprinted.
Yeah. The thing is, when you're designing games and trying to license them to other companies, it's a tortuous process because it takes months for a company to look at a game, and more often than not, they say no, and then you have to go into the next company and the next company, and it takes too long. And there are some games where if I've been asked to design something like Anno or Rocketman, then that's fine. Somebody asks me to do something, I do it, they take the game. I don't have to go to the hassle of pitching it. But there are some ideas that I've got for games, and I think no company is going to publish these games. And also companies have their own kind of line. So at the moment, what I'm doing, and don't tell Julia this because she just doesn't want me to go back to running my own games company, but she won't be watching this. So, but why you need people now is you need a team. Okay, so one of the nice things we had with WARFROG, Treefrog, and it wasn't deliberate as such, but it was nice, was that most of the games we had the same artist, Peter Dennis, who's a friend of mine who lived just across the hills over in
Sheffield.
Sheffield way. And so we had a reliable artist, which meant that you had a consistent art style. And that's an important thing in a games line. So if you're going to start up a new company, you need an art director. You need some way of making sure that every game you do looks like it comes from the same company. Because if your artwork is different every time, then you've got problems. And the thing with artwork is freelance artists aren't always available. So you can't always get the artist you want, because artists generally are booking up 6 months in advance, and good artists will be booked up a couple of years in advance. So you need an artist or an art director. In my case, because I don't want to do social media, you have to have somebody who can do social media. You've got somebody who can do the Facebook, do the adverts, do Twitter, and all of that stuff. Because if you don't do that now, then nobody will take any notice of you. So you need at least 2 people to do that. So you can't. Unless you're a tiny company, I think, unless you're crazy, I don't see how a single person could run a games company now. It's just not doable. So, I mean, the plan I've got is kind of a 2-pronged plan. So I'm working, I think I might have mentioned the last time I was on, I'm working on these one-deck, one-play fantasy adventure games that are using the Fighting Fantasy IP. And I'm hoping those will be the kind of things that bring in regular money, so that because you can produce lots of them, sell them, and you just keep churning them out. And then use that to earn enough money so that you can pay staff, so that I can do the games that I want to do, the old kind of Treefrog, WARFROG, heavier style games, because those in themselves don't make enough money to make a living on. You can't run a games company just doing heavy games. It's just not.
I think you're right. The heavy games still don't sell vast numbers, do they?
No.
Brass being an exception.
Brass is an exception, and the thing is, this is it. As anybody in the games industry knows, you have no idea what's going to work. I mean, you really have no idea at all. And you can have what you think is the best game in the world with great artwork, and it can sink like a stone. And then somebody else can come along with half-baked crap game with terrible artwork, and it gets Game of the Year and sells a gazillion copies. So there is no guarantee for success.
I mean, for sure you have exceptions. Like, I mean, Turkcey's and Acrony's done pretty well. And I understand that was a big reason, like, gave Turkcey a lot of the confidence to start partnering up with people and going full-time. But I think that, yes, I agree. As a general rule of thumb, the lighter a game, the bigger an audience, the better it's probably going to do. Like, as a rule of thumb, I'm not saying, as a truism. And I totally get that, making some games because you hope that these will be games that keep selling, and if you've got a range, or if you've got a particular thing that you've known for, like, Dunstan's Cosmos adventure games or your fighting fantasy thing, if that takes off, and then you get the money and time essentially to then do whatever you want with some other things.
Yes.
And yeah, it sounds like, yeah, even though you might, there are so many skills, you're right, with marketing, with business. And I think this is the interesting thing, because Martin, I want to ask you point blank, you know, I know this might have been quite a few years ago, but Hammy, when you left WARFROG and then you said that you felt like there was some resentment wasn't the right word, but there was this feeling from other people that you were doing hardly any work and you were getting a big take of the money, so you preferred to leave to kind of keep your friendships and stuff intact. I want to ask Martin, like, did you feel any of that?
What, on
like
Hammy?
the resentment, or like that other people were feeling like Hammy was somehow getting some unfair amount?
No, I was completely oblivious of that. But then I generally live in my own little bubble, so I would never have noticed that. So, no, not a clue.
The rest, I mean, to be honest, among the rest of us, you know, we all wanted to support Martin and we wanted to help Martin, and we did. We went out, our concern as a group was to make sure that Martin could continue publishing games and make sure that he got a reasonable reward for what he was doing. And the primary problem from my feeling about the whole thing was that, you know, I was somehow taking the money that potentially should have been Martin's because the games were all being made and published and sold, and I wasn't therefore taking any risk, and I was still getting a load of the money. That's the way it felt to me. As it transpired, and I mentioned previously, there's still an outstanding bill of probably in the region of 15 grand that I'm never going to get, and because of our American distributor who never paid me, and yeah, so I was taking a risk, and I don't feel bad about that because lessons learned.
Yeah, it's still I don't know. It's a very different world now, but yeah, it's still very risky. I mean, it's like it's just looking on Kickstarter today, and I noticed there was a Kickstarter from Angel Fury or something, and it's by the same guy that did Terraforming Mars.
Okay.
And you'd think that would do gazillions. You'd think, oh, same guy, you know, Terraforming Mars, massively popular game. And I think it's sold like 500 copies or something. It's just over its target, and its target's really low. And it's like, and it's got loads of plastic figures, and you think that should do really well. And it's not. Now, there may be certain reasons why the campaign wasn't handled particularly well, but it's just an indicator that it's still a very risky.
I don't think a name alone is enough anymore, especially if that name is only really known for one game. I mean, I think that there are certain names where, like yours included, but I mean, frankly, you know, Richard Garfield could put anything up and people will spend at least serious time checking it out, but then you come up with, what was the one that Garfield did with Jenkins, you know, the quiz one?
I don't remember that, yeah.
But anyway, like there's some Garfield games that didn't do particularly well. Someone can hopefully remind me of the names that I'm thinking of. And
you can go quickly, go on BGG. Yeah.
Kickstarter is such a fickle thing. It seems like it's much more of a PR platform than anything nowadays. But my point is that, yeah, people, I feel like the name of the designer isn't enough. Having the Half-Truth, thank you, Salty Horse. I very much appreciate that. And yeah, Half-Truth, I don't think it did like that well. Kickstarter, if we look at how many backers it got, it's had so No, actually, to be fair, 9,000 backers. Because
That's actually
it's,
okay.
that's
I'd
pretty
kill for
darn good.
9,000 backers. Yeah, yeah.
That's like
You just
basically a
shot yourself in the
whole
foot there, didn't you?
drinks run. I
Yeah.
think this
But
is like this is the point, though, that Richard Garfield is kind of, and I don't want to speak in absolutisms, but I can't think of anyone who's kind of in the same league, frankly, who's like independently a millionaire from their first published design, who is kind of their first design Robo, like, I mean, Magic obviously published first, but then Robo it's still seen as a very good game, and then they single-handedly made a like CCGs. I mean, Netrunner and Vampire the Eternal Struggle are still being enjoyed nowadays, which is incredible. And they continue to have success after success with Keyforge, King of Tokyo. I mean, these are new evergreens, frankly. And
King of Tokyo is definitely an evergreen, yeah.
Schizoid, I think, is a... sorry, if I think there's some very questionable design decisions about that game. I don't know if you know, it's a video game that Garfield designed with Scapholius, and I think there's anyway, I don't want to derail this conversation more than it already has been. But my point is that Garfield, frankly, could be argued, I'm not going to say is, but it could be argued to be the best designer around right now.
Depends on your definition of best, I suppose.
But could be argued.
Yeah. Magic is a great game.
I think,
and that's, I think there's definitely, if you see a Kickstarter from them, there's going to be something. I don't think but then, you know, from you, there's going to be, from Martin Wallace, there's going to be a lot of people looking at it. But then from the designer of Terraforming Mars, that's one game. And I think people are now aware that you can make one great game, but not be a great designer. You need to have at least maybe 3 really solid games before people start thinking, oh, actually, this person's a good designer. I'm going to check out everything they make.
And it's still having the right game for Kickstarter. It was like Alan Moon, his last game was on Kickstarter, the Aftershock game, and died. And it's like, I was thinking that what is that even doing on Kickstarter? You know, Alan Moon's known for things like Ticket to Ride and Union Pacific and stuff like that. You know, he's known, you know, normally his designs just go straight into retail. That's the kind of designer he is. He shouldn't need to put his games on Kickstarter. And I think the public also, people on Kickstarter also perceive that. It's like, why do I have to Kickstart this? I'll just get it from retail. Whereas, you know, when the original Gloomhaven of 7 Continents, something like that, there was no guarantee that that was ever going to go to retail because it would never make sense. So people therefore get it. So, you know, you have to have, you still have to have the right product for Kickstarter. You know, this is why I hope Bloodstones hopefully will work, because it's only going to be available on Kickstarter. It's not going to go into retail. So if you don't get it on Kickstarter, you're not going to get it because, as I say, the production costs are so high.
So it's not like a Gloomhaven situation where if you print enough, then some of them could go into shops and you could turn it into an evergreen if it does well enough.
You know, if somebody else wanted to take the game on and produce it in quantities and do a retail version, I'm not going to argue with them. I'm not going to do that, because if you get it wrong, you end up with a lot of dead stock. And the thing you have to be very careful when you're running a games company is the initial growth of a company is your most dangerous time. And having a success is not necessarily the best thing in the world. You have to know what level you want to run your games company at. And that is actually, you know, Magic is actually a good example of that, in that when Wizards of the Coast first published Magic, you know, yes, it sold out, but they didn't have the money to do a print run. They didn't have the money to do a reprint. They weren't in a position to be able to grow the game. So they had to have a lot of input from a distributor, West End Games, who put a lot of money in to allow that to be reprinted. Because when you grow a company, that means you're usually sucking up a lot of capital. And it's bizarre. The Fantasy Flight games, Christian Peterson. I mean, Fantasy Flight, one of the biggest games companies in America. Christian Peterson sold that company so he could pay back his investors because they hadn't been paid back. Because all of the money it made went back into the company. So, it was a big company, but it wasn't necessarily making a lot of money. So he cashed his chips in, which I think is probably private information that I shouldn't be sharing. But there you go. So, you look at the outside of a company and think, oh, they must be making $1 million. It's like, not the case. Not always the case.
Wasn't there a situation with WARFROG, or I think it was WARFROG, or might have been Treefrog, where you ended up reprinting games? I think it was WARFROG, London. No, London was Treefrog, wasn't it? Where you ended up, there were a number of distributors wanting reprints, but the reprints got delayed, and we didn't happen for 6 or 9 months, and then the stuff actually appeared, and then it didn't sell because the distributors changed their mind because
yes. Yeah, and I think this is also things are being handled by Mayfair, and yeah, going into business with Mayfair, not a good idea. Fortunately, you can't do that now because they no longer exist. Because they were ordering games, but then it's like they weren't selling them because they were doing it on commission, right? So I'd be supplying the stock to them, or we'd be supplying the stock, and then they weren't selling it. And suddenly at that point, I'm thinking, hold on a moment. So you're taking zero risk here, and we're ending up with a whole load of dead stock in warehouses in America. So I had to rearrange the relationship with Mayfair after that, because dead stock will kill you. That's why Z-Man had to sell up in the end, because I think they ended up with too much. They do a lot of games, and some of them would sell very well. I bet there's a lot of other games they did that there was stock building up, and too much of that stock builds up, and then you go out of business. So that's why you have to decide what level you want to run your company at. So the kind of idea I've got is like, well, for my own stuff, I want to run it at a low level. I don't want to do big print runs. I don't want to do massive print runs. And the fighting fantasy stuff, I don't even want to print that. I'm just going to license that and just let somebody else do printing stuff, because I don't want to get into this.
This is kind of feels like a big continuation of the discussion of the artistic business divide, because there are two different worlds here. One is the kind of venture capital having to do all the taxes and be organized with everything, and the risk is losing money, the risk is dead stock. The other side of it is the kind of making a game. I'm going to print as many as I can definitely sell, as many as I've pre-ordered, and doing that in a much smaller way. But basically, hey, I'm making something, isn't it cool? I want to share it with people, and having these creative sparks. And it feels like two completely different worlds. And I don't know of anyone who's actually good, I'm going to say, at both of these worlds necessarily. I think there's plenty of people who are adequate, like for sure the Ragnar brothers you've mentioned. There are people who are fairly able to do things, but no one who's actually turned it into a...
The Ragnars were always pretty small scale, although they did license games to other companies.
And that's the question. Like, if the Ragnar brothers had got someone to take care of the boring organizational stuff, it feels like almost which is being your bottleneck. Is your design and creative part, is that your bottleneck, that your stuff just isn't good enough? Or is it that your marketing isn't good enough, or the business isn't good enough? And it feels like any one of these aspects could be a bottleneck to actually getting the games into people's hands. Do you know what I mean?
To do well with a game, it needs to be the right design, the right publisher, the right marketing at the right time. An example of not to do with WARFROG and Treefrog, but I got involved with JKLM games as well, and they were sent they were sent a demo of a game, and we got that demo for my gaming group. We got sent the demo copy to try out. We tried it out. We didn't like it. We played it again. We still didn't like it. We played it again. We still didn't like it. JKLM didn't take on the license. I've got the copy still.
You're talking about.
You know,
the reason that's
because that's the only time I've played
JKLM games is because, from what I understand, JKLM, it was kind of like a pyramid scheme in certain ways where investment capital was being taken for subsequent games,
this game here?
earlier games. And anyway,
can you see what that game is?
Matt's Leacock Global Outbreak.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Let's this is lower it down. We can't see the top of the box. In the not too distant future, the world is plagued by diseases that are rapidly spreading. Do you and your team have what it takes to keep the epidemics under control in time to find the needed cures? Wow. So
we play tested it. We hated it. It was published by Z-Man in the end, wasn't it?
Yep. Did all right. But I think the interesting thing, I think if
it wouldn't have, if
JKLM had published it, it would have died a death.
It would.
That's very true. JKLM would have. If JKLM had published it, do you think it would exist now?
No.
Yes. No, I disagree, because what would happen is JKLM
somebody else would have picked it up, like on the
license, and then somebody else would have licensed it.
Yeah, it would have done, but it wouldn't have been anywhere near as big an initial publication. It's got to
I'd be very interested to play that and see what development tweaks, if any.
That is almost exactly the same as the published game.
Wow.
And we hated it, and I still hate the published game. So,
but that's interesting. Going back to what I was saying before, where people don't know what's going to work, and sometimes when you're working on a design, sometimes you have to step outside of your own personal preference. Say, well, okay, this isn't the kind of game that I would play, but is this the kind of game that would have a market? And it's like the kind of stuff I'm working at the moment, like the FF stuff. These are not the kind of games that I would play. I mean, I still like playing games like Terra Mystica and kind of heavier Euro games like that. But I can see that there is a market for fantasy games, for role-playing games, because that so sometimes, you do have to see things from a different point of view. But again, it's difficult, and you can still get it wrong.
The great thing, the best thing about being involved in WARFROG, when WARFROG was in its pomp, shall we say, was that basically WARFROG was publishing the games that the guys in Manchester wanted to play, that Martin wanted to design. And they were all games, if I had to name my top 10 games of all time, I would say that 4 or 5, certainly 4 of the ones that were published when Martin and I were doing WARFROG together would be in the top 10 games of all time. And they're just stonkingly good games because they were the games we wanted to play. Did I care that 10,000 people don't want to play it? I don't really mind. As long as enough people want to play it to buy the games and we sell all the ones we make, I'm happy.
Yeah, because it's like Age of Steam. I mean, train games generally didn't sell. There was no money in train games. And I mean, you had 18XX and they were kind of home printed games then. There was no massive market for train games. And so we thought that was quite risky, didn't we? I think the first print run.
Well, so, I mean, it ended up doing okay.
Yeah, I just wish that John Bora hadn't stolen a design off me, or I just wish that, because I don't get any royalties for that anymore, because although I'm not allowed to say this, I'm contractually obliged not to say disparaging things about Rick Seward or Eagle Griffin, so I won't say any disparaging things about Rick Seward or Eagle Griffin.
Am I allowed to say disparaging things?
Yeah, you can do. You're not you haven't signed a legal document to not say anything disparaging about Rick Seward or Griffin.
We had a great relationship with John Bora to start with, and he was really helpful and very, very positive, and had half the stand at Essen and went out and drank with us and so on. And we got an agreement with him with regards to doing stuff with Age of Steam, and everything was nice and happy, and it was all done on gentlemen's agreements. And then John Bora got his arm badly broken by a train sometime between running by a railway engine, I believe. And
he was taking a shot across the stockyard, wasn't he? And got hit.
Yeah, when he was in between 2 jobs, or he just moved from one job to another, and he didn't have medical insurance. He ended up paying all his money to get his arm fixed, and it totally changed him. And we had a meeting with him the following Essen, at which everything that we'd agreed, he just changed. And because it was all done on gentlemen's agreements and it wasn't done in written contracts, it was, it all went out the window.
Yeah.
And it then got legal, and it was really difficult. But basically, John was paid money to develop Age of Steam, but claims to have designed it. John and I had an agreement for expansions of Age of Steam, which was on exactly the same terms as Martin and I had agreement for expansions, that I'd do the money, I'd do the business side, he'd get 50% of the profit, I'd get 50% of the profit. That was the agreement. No, absolutely not. That's definitely not what we agreed. I would never agree a deal like that. I want X euros per copy. Fine, John. I gave him X euros per copy, which was less than he would have got on 50% of the profit, but I didn't tell him that. And then it just snowballed, and it went into cloud cookie land. Very sad.
That's Republicans for you. They're all crazy.
But he was a perfectly decent bloke to start with. And I didn't say anything disparaging about anybody, and I've not signed any paperwork to say I can't.
No. But and there are hopefully, I've come across a few dodgy people in the business, but you have to be very careful who you deal with. So generally the rule is try not to deal with Americans, and you'll probably be okay. I hope there's no Americans watching.
Xenofuel says, I've learned over the years that everything should be put into writing. Yeah. And we were having this discussion, myself, Alan, Rita, and Matthew yesterday, about contracts with publishers, saying, by the time you get to if you actually have to enforce the document, then things have gone wrong. But having it in writing does make it more clear, for sure.
Yeah, but it doesn't. I had a contract with Eagle Griffin for brass that I thought was very clear, and they managed to get a lawyer that read it in such a way that what you and I would say, oh, that seems to be very clear, says, oh, no, it's not clear. So, and because they're in America, and because the contract states that, it will be judged in an American court, if you have an issue, it can cost you a lot of money to enforce that contract. Eagle Griffin destroyed all of their sales records a year after, after a year, which is illegal. You're not meant to do that. So basically, you were I'm trying to argue with them. You've been selling stuff and not paying royalties, and but there was no evidence because they destroyed all of the evidence. And I think that I was contractually obliged not to say that. But there's just an example of that contracts are basically. It still comes down to you have to have trust in the people you're dealing with, and if you can deal with companies that you trust, you don't have to refer to a contract.
I think some of that was WARFROG was really a very, very high level hobby. I mean, in most people's books, if you're making a company and at peak, the most we sold in 1 year would have been 6,000 board games and 4,000 expansions. So, and you were talking about retail prices, probably £200,000. I mean, obviously we weren't turning over that much, but we were selling 10,000 units of product in a year at peak. But I say it was almost a hobby because we all still at that point had other jobs. We were doing it as a sideline, as an extra sideline. Yes, it was properly accounted for. We paid all our taxes. We did all of our bills. We were VAT registered as WARFROG. It was a big organization in terms of turnover and money, but actually it was a number of guys. Martin and myself were the primary people, but then there were 6 or 8 other people who were involved as developers, testers, helpers on the stand, and so on. And we were a bunch of mates who happened to be running a games publishing company.
No, Essen was great for that because all mates working the stand, and it was a laugh. And you can't do that if you have to hire staff. It's not the same.
No.
Let's. I don't want to talk about this for another hour, but even though like not right now, but because I actually, if nothing else, I've actually got a vaccine scheduled for an hour and a half.
Yeah, we
Excellent.
should probably stop stalking some point soon because it's
But-
getting late here.
I just want to touch upon what you said. Like playtesters are massively useful. I think we can all agree on that. That's not so controversial or thing to say. I guess then there's the question which I'm not expecting us to come to any conclusions about, but actually remuneration of people is a really difficult thing. It's been pointed out. Alan, I can't remember when. Oh, I think it was Alan in an essay that I proofread for Alan, pointing out that if playtesters had to be remunerated for recreational war games, as they do in professional war games being war games that are designed for the actual military, then recreational war games basically wouldn't exist. And the board game industry basically wouldn't exist if playtesters had to be remunerated. And that's a really difficult thing in a way, because, and can we touch upon that really quickly, that people deserve money, but paying them
Well, no, you can't start paying playtesters. You know, if you want to, you can pay a developer. Yeah, we did that once, and it didn't end well. But there's so little money to be made from games that you can't start chopping, slicing even more of the pie off. So there is nothing in the budget to pay playtesters, and also there's so many playtesters that you need, different groups at different times. It just being practical. I mean, what I do is kind of, generally there are certain, and I certainly used to do this in the UK, and I do it to a certain degree over here. There are certain playtesters who I use on a regular basis, and as much as possible, I give them free stuff. So they get free copies of the game, or if I've got some other stuff, because sometimes, I get freebies from companies and I just pass it on. So they get paid in games.
Yeah, I mean, we
we
used to do that. I think I mentioned it previously at Essen, where we trade copies of our new game with other companies for their new game, and end up with a big pile of games. And then anybody that had helped on the stand, which were largely the people who were testing and developing the games with Martin, we got a raffle or a rota to pick things out of the pile. What of the stuff that we picked up this year's freebies?
Yes, I remember that back at the Young, wasn't it?
You used to get 2 or 3. Everybody used to get 2 or 3 games for free. Now, I did a playtest for a version of World in Flames for Harry Rowland, and I led the UK playtest group. World in Flames is 100 hours to play all the way through. We actually took a week. There were 6 of us. We all took a week off work, and we used to do this quite regularly to play the game. We took a week off work. We went round to somebody's house, and every day we played through a bunch of the game. And then of the evening, I wrote a playtest report. I emailed the playtest report over to Harry. Harry would make some comments, maybe tweak the things slightly going forward, and we play the next day, the next day, the next day. We took a full week's holiday, and yes, we got something for it. We got 2 free copies of the game for the group. That's it. We were happy, but we were happy not because we wanted to play the game. We would. It's like being paid to go on holiday almost. There are more than enough people out there who want to play a new game, and even if it's never published, it's quite exciting. The biggest challenge. Yes, your name in the game manual. That's really cool. Your name in the game manual. Yeah,
might even be spelt right.
Sometimes, yeah. The biggest challenge I find with playtesters is that sometimes you can get playtesters. People will be testing. Martin's got a new game. He's going to try it out with some people. If the people aren't regularly playing games with Martin, they're very unlikely to go, "Oh, this is terrible." And you've got to have them. You've got to have people who are willing to be rude, willing to tear strips off a game when it doesn't work. And by the sound of it, the group you've got in Australia is getting that way now. In that, you know, they're telling you it was dull and dry and whatever.
Well, I could tell that myself, but I've got a very good playtester over here, a guy called Steve Deng, who's a Chinese guy, and he's a bit like. Do you remember Chris Boot? Did you ever hang out? Yeah. He's a Chinese version of Chris Boot in that he is the best games player I've ever come across. Pretty much any game you play, it's like, well, who's going to come second? Because Steve just wins. Mm-hmm. He can internalize rules very quickly, and he can. If there's a broken strategy, he will find it. I mean, he broke the first time I playtested Rocket Men. He broke it in 10 minutes. Okay, this is broken. So reset, fix it, and so other playtesters, like they'll say, oh yeah, that was nice, and it's like, yeah, it's not really the feedback I was looking for. So no, I'm looking at it. I've got a good range of playtesters over here. You know, some very analytical ones who will drill. You know, will look for broken strategies, and that's what you really need.
And you've also got the blind playtesters, which is another thing that many people. It's all well and good. You know, you and your mates play the game, and you've played it with 10 different groups of people at conventions where you were sitting there teaching the game and playing the game. Still doesn't help if somebody's going to get it out and play it straight.
And eventually, I mean, it's just blind playtesting. That was always for me that thing that's at the end of the process, because but yeah, there's there's people all around the globe that, you know, if I asked to playtest a game, they jump in and do it. So I'm kind of lucky that way, because I'm known, you know.
Yeah, you've earned
people are more likely to want to play test one of my games.
Yeah, you have earned the fact that people are more than willing to try your games out. They've never played. Which one was it that we changed? The rules were changed 3 times in the first turn and a half.
Oh God!
That was one back at the beer house. That was really bad.
Yeah, probably. I've designed some really sucky games, but it's like I say, there's this group. I used to go more regularly, but moving up here a bit further away. I meet on a Thursday night. They're all wannabe game designers, and so it's basically people turn up, they bring a game, you play test it, and so and it's a karma system. So you're not always play testing your own stuff. You're playing other people's games, and some of the games I played there are just awful. I mean, one of the guys has stopped going because I think Steve actually stopped going because he said, just the games are just not very good. And I tried talking to the guys. It sounds very patronizing. It's like, these are the things you should be doing. But I think actually game design is harder than it looks. That's the problem. Or unless these guys are making it look hard, but at least they're there to play test games anyway. So yeah,
it's not true of all creative endeavors, that you see the final book, you see the final tune, but you don't hear you're not there for all the work, you're not there for all the years of training. I mean, you must be a better designer now than you were 30 years ago, I would hope.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
And, I'm definitely a better designer than I was 6 years ago when I basically was just getting started. But I think it is kind of time to do a bit of a recap and a wrap up.
Yeah.
So we talked about how it all started 30 years ago. We talked about Age of Arguments, which was basically designed for the components of another game. We had we look at Bloodstones with 144 plastic bits, and I mean, to be fair, at least they're in their own little bags for their factions, but very pretty board. We talked about Welsh Dragons and deciding, hey, I'm going to actually put in some combats and some magic and some dragons in it, which, yes, it's a simple. I'm not against magic for the record. I'm not against war as a setting or theme or something to be in the game. I just said that it feels quite easy, and I wonder if there's like a reason why people haven't tried to tackle more nuanced things, if you know what I mean.
That's another discussion.
Yeah, it absolutely 100%. We talked about Dragoons of Dragons. We talked about casting fireballs out of our pockets. We talked about games being brilliant because they give us money, because they're all about the people, they're all about freedom, and Martin, he said, are all about clarity, and they give us a safe space. We talked about having this compulsion to make games at 29, about the handmade white boxes, about stickiness from all the spray mounts, about sliver bits, and Paul Evans being announced dead. It was all a lie, though.
It was.
I mean, Paul Evans wasn't ever actually dead. We talked
He's still
about
alive now.
the Ludofax warehouse. We talked about easily selling 300 or 400 at Tessa and selling a good chunk to Fun Again and other shops, and how honestly, like Hammy, I would love someone to come and do my tax and VAT bills and like all that stuff, which is what, and organization. We talked about Martin being a terrible, I don't know if you used the word terrible, but I'm going to,
I'm not going to argue with it.
About you being a terrible business person, organizer person. And we talked about raising money for Julia's daughter, self-assembly, 500,000 bits of wood, privatization of the post office, having changed everything. Definitely things are different now. I mean, you would get probably someone else to do bits of assembly of woods. We talked about not having adverts, having maybe going from a situation of selling 1,000 directly and 500,000 to shops, saying, okay, we'll do 2,000 basic edition to the shops with the custom components, and then have 1,000 with this upgrade kit, like a deluxeified version with the wooden pieces and whatnot, and only able to get that at full retail of our website. We had a look at World in Flames, which someone in the comments mentioned apparently they managed to leave off New Zealand. I don't know if that's
I think it's not. I don't think New Zealand is there.
No.
And yes, it is bigger than the campaign for North Africa map.
Well, the campaign for North Africa is paperboard, and the world record is for a board game with a mounted board.
Okay, thank you for clarifying
that. Physical
that.
Mounted board. There are board games with paper boards that are bigger. But the key bit is the hard mounted board is what makes it a board game according to the Guinness Book of Records. There's been a load of people arguing it isn't the biggest board game because War in Europe is bigger, for example, which it is. It has got New Zealand. It's only got a bit of it.
And let me make you bigger so people can see. There we go. So it has New Zealand. Brilliant. And then we talked about the difficulty generally of doing these things for just one person. We talked about that terraforming Mars and how just having a name from one game isn't enough. We had a tangent where I gave some love to Garfield, except for Schizoid. Schizoid's a great game, except that about level 20 something. There's too much randomness, and earlier anyway, I could talk about that another day. We talked about like having names. Talks about passing on pandemic that you didn't. What was it called originally?
Global Outbreak.
Thank you very much. Global Outbreak. A game that JKLM and Hammy did not want to publish. We talked about playtesting. We talked about giving a free game, getting 2 copies of a free game for like a bunch of people taking a week off work and spending 100 hours on a game. We talked about being in the credits. This has been such a wonderful discussion. And I want to say thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Zunaful, for being here. I appreciate it. And designer cardboard just meant that it was partly cut off. But yeah, I can understand the annoyance. And thank you, as always, for moderating the comments and being present around, Alex. And most importantly, thank you, Martin, and thank you, Hammy, for joining me on this discussion. It has been an absolute delight. And I want to firstly remind everyone that if you want to find me, I am Stuff by Bez everywhere. If you want to find Hammy, then you can find the shop, either the main website or the Facebook page. Check that out. And if you want to like, you know who Martin Wallace is, but check out the website over there, wallacedesigns.com.au, because
There might be
there
something
you
interesting
go.
on it.
Yeah, you might be doing something exciting about your
Yeah.
new stuff.
And so for everyone, once more, thank you, and it's over to you. What are you up to? You can share, but only if you want to. So I am going to leave the house shortly to go to Guy's Hospital to get my COVID jab. And then I'm going to come back. I'm going to work with Leila and Chris and do a whole bunch of things. Hammy, what are you generally up to?
Probably trying to get some website updates for the shop, because there've been a whole lot of deliveries that haven't got processed onto the website. And then tonight is game night for the first time since
Yay.
March 2020. Yes,
Wow.
first time.
Wow.
Yes, that'll be good. Quite excited about it.
So, yeah, I'm going to watch a bit of TV and then go to bed because it's later.
Because it's night.
It's 9:30 now.
Because
Yeah.
9:30. It's not so
Yeah,
late,
9:30 in
but
the
you are an
evening.
early
Yeah.
sleeper.
Mm.
If you want to check out my next streams, please go to my Google thing. There's a combination of all sorts of things. Streaming every day at 10 a.m. UK time. Tomorrow I am with Dina, who chatting about running events in the afternoon, playing something solo. If I will either be trying a new prototype that I invent between now and then, or if I don't have the energy, depending on how my side effects go. If I'm feeling a bit under the weather, I might just end up playing a bit of Root, and that might be it. On Friday, I've got Friendly Friday Shenanigans. We will talk a wee bit about what's a game. And in the afternoon, I've got play dates with someone online and are going to be streaming a game that I did some very vague solo playtests, but the game that I playtested yesterday wasn't good. So hopefully I can come up with something better by Friday. We'll see how it goes. And then, yeah, there's all sorts of things. But thank you very much once more to everyone. Share, spread the word. I am, if you're watching live on Twitch, I am going to check who else is streaming and move over and raid them. What's Idle Michael? Let's go and raid Amadeus Music, because I think I raided Michael yesterday. So feel free to copy paste that and raid Amadeus _music. And for now, that is the end of the show. Lots of love to everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the great stories. Thank you for the great discussions. And bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go through. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye, Martin.
Okay, yeah, they're cool. And yeah, talk next time.
Bye-bye, Hammy.
Bye.
Bye. See you next time, Hammy.